Hi, this is Trent Clark, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur, international speaker, longtime coach in professional baseball, coaching in 3 world championships. And today I welcome my guest on the Winners Find a Way show, Kevin Santiago.
What's up, man?
How are you, buddy?
Good. I
Man, you look good.
I know. I remember Spees had his 2 World Series rings on. You got yours. I forgot mine.
Yeah, well, I don't wear them all, right? But
Right.
it would have been nice to see that Slammers ring, right? Come on, man. It's
Hey,
the ring, it's the
it's
ring show.
right. There's not as many diamonds, but it's still pretty.
It's pretty. It's pretty, man. Hey, listen, you know what I love about those rings? It's always earned, never given,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So excited about Kevin joining us today for the Winners Find a Way show. Here's the show. Have you ever faced stiff adversity, felt like losses are mounting and you need to find a better way? Well, I think you came to the right place, whether you're already an entrepreneur, a leader, a coach, an athlete. You're just looking to start your journey today to being elite. I think this is the perfect show and podcast for you. And I bring people on who have been through some journeys, and Kevin is no different. Kevin, tell them real quick, Kevin Santiago, tell them where they can find you.
KP Santiago 10, the number 10, on Instagram and Twitter.
All right, nice. And you're on LinkedIn as well?
I am.
Okay, very good.
Not as active though.
Okay, very good. All right, let me give you a few highlights of my guest, Kevin Santiago. Youngest of 3. I knew Kevin's older brother much before I knew him. And youngest of 3 in a baseball sports family in Chicago, Illinois. Your nickname is Pebs, which we're going to get into. After baseball, which you're a good ball player, after baseball, you hit the railroad and you become a supervisor, union VP. You are doing life as the American success, right? Financials look good. You got the house, you got the dog, you got the car, you got the fiance. I mean, everything society says is success, you have a hold of and had it. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then things changed.
Yep.
A tragic accident, very critical. There's probably things that led up to that, probably before that. Some key people come back into your life. A prison sentence, which we want to talk about. And now it's finding a way, a new definition of success, a new journey. You've been a ring with the Joliet Slammers, winning I think it's the Frontier League, correct?
Correct.
And winning a championship there, to St. Xavier, winning conference titles. I'm sporting my St. Xavier, the oldest Catholic institution in Chicago. I'm sporting my St. Xavier today for all you St. Xavier Cougs. Shout out.
Right.
And then of course, you're a Windy City Thunderbolt today as a coach, and you've been a long time player and coach. So we're going to definitely develop into that. So Kevin, before I go all into you, right, let's talk a little bit about why do you come on the show? Why do you tell your story? Tell me a little bit about why Kevin Santiago wants to do that.
I just see where society's at right now. And, I think society's starving for authenticity and genuineness and things like that. And, when I share my story, I get a lot of feedback saying, like, man, I just see your heart and your passion for wanting to help and turn things around for other people, help them in any way, things like that. Like, everybody's always going through something, like good or bad. I mean, but I'm one of those guys that loves to pull up next to somebody when they're struggling and just kind of whatever you need, let's do it. Whether it be on the baseball field now or off the field. I've helped out with Spees and his journey a little bit. You and I've gone out there quite a bit. I've helped out with high school kids that are addicted to heroin and things like that. And sometimes it's not even giving them answers. It's just being there to listen to them and, kind of put yourself in their shoes and just say, hey, this is what I would do, man. Like, let's try doing something like this or maybe go about it this way or something like that, so it's not, sometimes it's just listen to them, and just being there and they see that, and sometimes that's all I need.
I love that. I mean, I really, we kind of talk about that definition of servant leadership, and a lot of different definitions will go into that for sure. But I mean, did you know this? Like, was there a time in, as a kid, like that kind of that impactful pivot point where you said, "Hey, I'm going on this journey of sports and I'm going to be serving others eventually." I mean, was that clarity as a kid, or was there other clarifiers for you as a kid to point you in a direction?
So like the servant leadership or any of that never really came to me. I mean, like clearly, I mean, probably when you and I first met, and I was like searching to be like a character coach or something along those lines, that's when the clarity really like kind of took its groove. Growing up, it was more or less just like, this is what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a professional athlete in baseball, and it was I was always told, especially by my mom, like it's just a game, and like I see scouts out here now that have scouted me, that are scouting our guys now. And that's one thing they've always said is like, Kev, I remember when we were scouting you, like you were always that guy that had the smile on his face. Like you were just out there having a good time, no matter what the score was. Like you were always lifting your teammates up, things like that. And I look back now and I try to be that for these guys. Like, yeah, I am a coach, but I try to kind of be a coach and like a team player, so to speak.
Yes.
And it's a tight line to walk sometimes because guys get a little too comfortable and kind of overstep that bound. But and it's understanding that I put that out there for them, and I just kind of pull up next to them and say, hey, we can't be doing that or something. But yeah, I mean the clarity on the servant leadership really came about just recently within the past, I don't know, 8 years or so.
Your position as a player was a catcher, correct?
No, it's middle infield.
Okay, middle infield. Okay, all right. So I was thinking, as a catcher, I always feel like leader on the field, right? Like, so
Absolutely,
that's
yeah.
why I was thinking. Okay, so let's move to well, why we're on, you as a kid. Let's talk a little bit of how you got the nickname Pebs, because that's not it's unique to you, right? Like Pebs. Everyone wants to know what that means, right?
Right. Yeah. So, and it's funny because the guy Phil, he was a teammate of mine, like sophomore year, summer ball. He's the one that came up with the nickname, and his brother, like we always hung out. And he's got an older brother, and probably 6 years ago, somebody called me Kevin when we were all hanging out, and he's like, "Who is Kevin?" So this whole time, like 20 something years, everybody's been calling me Pet, and he had no idea what my real name was. Like,
yes,
that's like when I hear Pebs, like those are my guys. Like those guys really know who I am.
So hold on before you keep going. I want to tell people on the show who don't know this, by the way, because this is very important in athletics. We give nicknames and they are assigned as like biblical, right? This is not uncommon. There are many a times where I have to go to a roster going, wow, that kid's name's Ryan. Like I have no idea, because a nickname has been associated with someone, and it's often last name, right? Like, not uncommon for me to be Clarky, TC, all those things that are somewhat related to the name. Right. But there are names that go out there and it's like, I have no idea what his real name is, right? So it makes me laugh, but it's not uncommon that someone you've known for probably nearly 20 years says, your first name's Kevin?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't see that, right? Like you get the, you don't even look like a Kevin to me.
Right.
You look like a Jimmy. Like, right? Jimmy, only Jimmy. So keep going then. And I just had to tell the audience about how that works, right?
You're absolutely right. And no, so the nickname's Pebbles, and that comes from my older brother. His name is Rock. His nickname is Rock. He got that when he was younger, about 12 years old, went to the Little League World Series. He was just a bigger kid, so they called him Rock. That song "Solid as a Rock" came out.
Yes.
I forget who sings it, but that was the anthem back then, I guess, for my brother. And the guys were just trying to come up with a nickname for me, and they're like, and my brother, he's 6'4" or 6'2", like 280 pounds. I'm 5'10", 190 pounds at the time. And they're like, you act just like your brother, so he's like, we're just going to call you Pebbles.
You're like a little rock.
Right, a little rock. So
I love it.
yeah, so I kind of,
So
like you said,
good.
like it was stamped on me. I kind of had to accept it because that was the nickname assigned to me. So
Well, this makes me laugh because, in line with this, right? The reason I met your brother earlier is because our sons, his son and my son, played hockey together when they were like 7 and 6 years old. Now they're, high school age kids playing this high level hockey. Both of them are on to bigger, better things, right? But his son's a really, really good player. And so I don't know Rock's real name. I've known him for 10 years because they're 17 now, right?
Right.
So like, I don't know his first name.
Right. It's Richard.
Yeah, right. Like, right. I would have never, like Dick Santiago actually makes sense now for me. But, right. I would have never thought Rock. Like, I love Rock. He's great. So yeah. That is so awesome. That's so funny. You learn something new every day. I now know Richard Santiago. And by the way, I used to office in a building where he works, right? So I would see him all the time, and heaven forbid, like someone say, hey, go find Richard Santiago. I would be like, who the heck are you talking about, bro? Like, I have no idea who that is, right?
Right.
So that's hilarious. Okay. So let's keep moving with your story, right? We kind of talked about your introduction. You go through baseball, you go through college, and you didn't finish your degree and go into independent ball. You're not drafted. You kind of making your way through sports, but you're also thinking like, hey, I got to start life, right? I gotta. Maybe it's not working for me. And you start railroad. You start, growing. Applying some of the things you learned in baseball is this hard work ethic guy who's a smile, joy, bring it to other people. And they go, wow, you're pretty good. Supervisor, pretty good. Union vice president. And now you've got all the world successes, right? You've got the fiance, the dog, man, like you're on your way to the 2.2 kids. You're right on the way, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then there's some things that change, right? In a very short time, work changes. There's some conflict at work, right? And there's some conflict in the personal relationship that's pretty deep and dark, and ultimately costing you the relationship. I don't know how much you want to go into that, but like, let's just say costing you the relationship. And at this point, probably some level of depression sets in, and so you are not at your best, not where you've been in the past. A turn to alcohol is always a nice little, solvent for anytime you're down, right? And that's a common place in our society for sure. And a tragic accident happens.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you take us through, exactly where you were, when this the moments before and how this unfolds.
Yeah. So, like you said, like society says, have the house, the dog, the good looking girl. I had the jacked up Jeep and the Jeep Wrangler with the top off door, or
the
top
lift
down
kit.
doors off.
I got a lift kit, man.
Right. Yeah. Listen to Kenny Chesney, like going to the beach, like living it up, So, the fiance and I, we end up splitting for whatever reason. And it was heartbreaking. I fought to try to make that work. And, I felt like on her end, like it wasn't really there. So, being an athlete, like you're supposed to be mentally tough, right? And, just grind through it. So anxiety and depression, those things were for the mentally weak, right? Like they couldn't hold their composure. They couldn't succeed through hard times, stuff like that. So when all that started going through, or, the breakup and stuff, like all that started coming to life. Like I couldn't control it, and I've never experienced it before. I may have, but I didn't know about it. So yeah, I go out with a couple buddies. Like they're like, just come out, and I knew better because we, growing up, we've always played like backyard football and stuff, and I've always sprained an ankle, right? And they're like, come on, let's just play pickleball. And I'm like, all right. So we play pickleball, end up tearing my Achilles tendon. So now I'm out, have surgery, laid up on the couch, thinking about everything with the ex, so anxiety and
Off
depression.
work, no work.
Yeah, out of
'Cause,
work.
yeah.
So the anxiety and depression is like really setting in bad, so um, so I had leave from work up until a certain point, and for whatever reason, the paperwork got mixed up. They deemed me AWOL, put me up for investigation, end up losing my job.
Mm.
Um,
So the world's success story is now all fractured.
Fractured. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, I get with a couple buddies and they're like, hey, and this is right when I started healing from the surgery, started walking, being able to drive, because I had the Jeep with the stick, right? You got to have a Jeep with a stick if you're a guy, right? So, uh, so I go out, we go out, watch the SEC championship, and then we're doing
Football season.
yeah. So we're doing a thing for, Santa's helpers, we buy gifts for, kids that are in need. So everybody goes, like the girl puts on an event, we go there, we drop the stuff off, things like that, so driving home that night, getting in an accident, over the legal limit of alcohol, and lady ended up losing her life that night. So now here I am, like, not only anxiety, depression, PTSD now, the not being able to sleep, like just reliving that night over and over and over for even today sometimes. It's just, it was hard. I mean, it was hard. Like nobody wants to go through that or anything, so so now I'm looking this stuff up, right? Like I go into county for a month, I get bailed out. I get back home and like, I know how I have to recover, right? Like, I just want to be left alone. Like, hard day at work, like just leave me alone, give me an hour or so. And like, I knew this was going to be a toll, so I was just, my parents were like, just come back home. I'm like, no, I need time. Like, I just need to be all right and figure this out, so now I'm reading, 7 to 14 years. Again, I've never been in trouble, anything, speeding tickets and stuff, but it's just one of those things. Like, I started reading stuff online just to see what was up, and the cool, like it don't get me wrong, like this whole thing, like it beats me up every day, but like the cool thing was to see how much support I had, just online.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but and you got to take the positive as much as you can out of that,
Yeah.
So, a month after being home, like now that American dream's actually broken, right?
Yeah.
It's not fractured anymore. It's just broken. Like, I'm going to have this background. I'm going to have this title as a felon, all this negative stuff. Right. So, like, if all that was gone, then what's this whole life about? Right. Like I had it all. I'm probably not going to get it again. So like, now what?
I mean, are you when you go and you're on your own, are you suicidal here? Are you okay? Are you where are you at with the unknown? And obviously a tragic, I mean, there's guilt, there's shame, there's all sorts of things going on, right? So where are you at right now, from a mental health standpoint?
Yeah. So obviously the PTSD, the anxiety, the
Yes.
depression, never dealt with it before. Right.
Right.
Had
No
no
tools.
outlet,
No tools.
Right. Yeah. No tools in the toolbox, other than alcohol, which is the whole,
Which is not a tool, bro.
right.
That's
Right.
an enabler, right? Like,
Right.
which is already turned bad. Like,
Right.
even right.
Right. So I'm like, all right, so now, like, what do we do now? So the next best thing was just to get a pistol and end it. And I sat at my house for 3 days straight, no sleep, didn't eat, didn't drink anything, with a pistol on my coffee table, just rocking back and forth. Picked that pistol up many times. Yeah. it was just, again, like I didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
So yeah, very much suicidal. And again, I didn't even know how to do that, like, right. Like
Again, not a tool that we have in the toolbox, right?
Uh,
Like, yes.
I'm like, there's got to be a different way. And when I first went into county, it was, I was actually reading the Bible. It was so different. Like guys would be up and I would sleep, and then I would be asleep when they would be up and stuff. So I just tried to stay on a different level because for whatever reason, I thought I was better than them. I don't belong in here, all this stuff, and I have a good grasp on how God works now, but early on, I was just like, I had no idea why I was reading the Bible or how it even came about. Right. So,
Did you have that as a kid? I mean, was there some foundational level where you see, I was a CE goer as a kid, like Christmas and Easter, right? Like, so did you have a foundation there at all, or?
I did. It kind of came like how you were, like Christmas and Easter, like towards the back end of it, but like growing up, like church every Sunday, things like that. But I never really had a relationship with God or Jesus Christ. Like I knew all about it, but I didn't know that was an outlet.
You had some knowledge. Okay, good.
Right. Yeah. So, so I remember one of my buddies being involved with the church, and I reached out to him, Bobby, and we had gone to high school together, played football together, things like that, and did some side jobs together. But after that, we just kind of split, and didn't really hear anything from each other. But that's how we guys and our group is. Like it's like whatever, we pick up right where we left off. So I actually called him that night. I said, reached out to him. Hey, can you talk? And he's like, I've been waiting for this call. I'm like, what? So we get on the phone, and he asked me some difficult questions, and about God, like, do you take Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and things like that. And I'm like, I don't know, I guess, like I've heard that.
Yeah.
So we talked for 3 hours that night.
Yeah.
And he's like, I will be over on Monday morning, and we're just going to sit and talk. And we did that for a year and a half, and it turned into a Bible study, and life started making more sense to me. And what society says, the house, the girl, the Jeep, the big old English Mastiff, like none of that stuff even mattered anymore.
Yeah.
And it really is slap in the face of like where I was at and how far I was gone, and what I was using as an outlet for all the pain that I was going through.
Yeah.
So yeah, we met for a year and a half. I got sentenced to 3.5 years. I did 16 months in prison. And just from that point on, I mean, there was a guy, Paul, that kind of jumped on board, like, Paul, and he's like and he said it early on, like, you're going to go in. There's no doubt about it. Right. Like you're going to do time. And he's like, we need to armor you up. Right. Like you need to go in there. You're going to go to a dark place, and you need to be the light in there. And that was my mission for that whole year and a half of prep before I even went in. Went to my sentence at my court, get my sentence, and they gave me a month to get my stuff together. And then I went in and took my time and pleaded out. And Paul said it was the coolest thing that he saw was me walking behind, like they're taking me into custody, handcuffed with my Bible in my hands. He's like, that was your foundation. So, I go in and you just start spreading the word, man. Like, like it is a dark place, bro. Like,
right. It's hard. I can't imagine, I mean, it just, I cannot imagine. I think it's a lot of people's worst nightmare.
Right.
All of it, by the way, like no one wants to accidentally hurt anyone, right? Like, let alone a death, right? And no one wants to go to prison. And
Right.
if I recall in that, I mean, you actually had a chance to plea out of this and time and do an extended, um, probationary period and this and that, based on character, things that about you, but you chose this repentance as part of what you thought you had to do. Is that right?
Yeah. So, early on, well, obviously the year and a half kind of, I knew right from wrong, right? I thought I did before, but now I really knew it. So I remember my attorney coming out and saying, "Hey, we're going to need character references, things like that." And I'm like, "Okay, well, like, what are those? How many? How many is a lot?" And he's like, "You should be good with about 20, right? And this is what you need to have included in there." I showed up the next court date with 122 character references.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and it was awesome to see.
Yeah.
This,
Well, and I think that's what you're talking about, that support, right? When you talk about the good that comes out of it, the people that are coming willing to go, put their name on it for you, right? Like to put their name on the line and say, hey, I will sign up for this guy. And I mean, as a young person, adult, anytime, I think anytime in your lifetime that someone will put their name on the line for you, I mean, it's a big deal, right? We don't take that lightly. But I want to come back to something you said that was very important, to me at least. And I want to dig a little deeper on this. Like before, I thought I knew right and wrong, but after the year and a half of training myself up, prepping my armor for what was about to happen, and kind of what's next, that line had clarity is what I heard. I'm paraphrasing, but you had clarity now. I think a lot of us have a blurred line of right and wrong, right? Like right and wrong. Well, it's gray. I mean, I'm just going to lie a little bit on the expense report, right? Like it's, like, oh, well, so it's gray, and we draw a line in the sand, which we can easily cover and move the line pretty quickly on where that is for us, right?
right.
So
And the popular phrase is like, it's easier to ask for forgiveness, right? Like,
that's right. That's
not
right.
like,
Beg, don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness.
right. Like, so yeah, I mean, everything just became more clear, like just getting in the word and understanding God's design, where society's at with certain topics, things like that. But I mean, I remember, like, I was a union guy, right? Like, so every sentence started with an F bomb or.
Oh yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, the work on the railroad was not the
Right.
church choir. In fact, it turns
Right.
out, right? Yeah, I worked in the shipping industry a long time, right? And I get that.
Right.
Like that's a very, but could someone find that clarity, like you found that path without, do you think they could do that without, a quote unquote biblical foundation? I mean, can they do that way? Can they get there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The the problem I see with that is it just doesn't last, and it's always on to the next.
Mm.
Like, this is a foundation that does not move. Um, Obviously,
But
having good support, having good ideas, being able to bounce things off of people, like, that's all great. Like, I fully
yeah.
support that. Um, but sometimes you get bad intel, and now what?
Yeah. I think that's why it's important in Al-Anon, like AA, that there's a 12 step, and one of those steps is a spiritual higher power component. There's something more than just me. And I haven't been through AA, but I'm familiar with the learnings, right? And so I think there is that component that says, I think part of it's gratitude. I think part of it's perspective, because we're not very good when we're self-focused, right?
Right.
We tend to be, prideful. Things don't usually go well for us when we're just self-focused. And we see that in teams, right? We talk about I, me players all the
Yeah.
time, and and it doesn't tend to work well. But let's talk a little bit. Let me ask you a question going through this. I mean, knowing what you know now,
Well,
I
here,
mean,
I'm going to stop you
oh,
because
okay, yeah, let's finish.
with the, with the character letters and things.
Yes, yeah, please, let's go back. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So I think, towards the end of it, before they were going to give me my sentence, the attorney came out and he's like, they're going to give you probation. And I was like, wow, like that's great. And I just looked at my dad and I was just like, I can't, and like again, like union me, I'm like, hell yeah, like let's do this,
Yeah. F yeah.
Right.
Union
Yeah,
me. Right. Yeah.
yeah. Like, let's go. No, but like it's having that different perspective and like, it just changed my heart, changed my mind. And I put myself in, if this happened to my mom or my sister or whatever it may have been,
Yes.
like, I would have been like, yeah, he's a good dude. Like great guy, like successful, how society says it. But I wouldn't be okay with probation. Right.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say he doesn't deserve 7 to 14 years, but he has to do some time, right? So I told my attorneys, no, I'm not going to do probation. And he's like, what?
Yeah, right. He's like, this is one I've never heard before, actually.
Right. And I was
Right.
just like, it's not the right thing to do.
Let's talk about something you just touched on, really important, like my heart and my head. What happens when those two are incongruent, right? Like, because my head says, heck yeah, like no prison, I'm down with it. But your heart's going, that's not okay, bro. Like, you know better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough. It's almost, I mean, it's an internal war, like,
Yes.
and you just have, I mean, the initial, like I said, the initial response was, hell yeah, like we're good.
Yeah.
But like right away, and like I referenced like my union mouth because I remember like listening to Eminem working out, and like after a while, like the Holy Spirit was just working inside me, like, every time I cursed, and I remember reaching out to Bobby, like, why does it hurt when I swear now, and he's just like, just keep reading your Bible, So yeah, that was the same warfare I was having on that day. Like, I'm like, cool. And then right away, the Holy Spirit's like, no, the right thing to do is this. And when it hit hard.
It's so interesting because I just read something about this with a couple, right? Who, fell in love at a young age, stayed pure into this thing, started their marriage in the right way. And it was very intriguing to me that the guy had been in just like the chemical reaction of their marriage being in pure and in sync with their faith and everything they did and quote unquote, abstinence, doing it the right way, all that stuff, right? He talked about how I would hurt going away on business trips, like being away from her. Like I felt like this connectedness that I don't think a lot of people feel anymore in marriages because we come into it pretty broken, right? And he talked about that. But one of the things that he talked about that really just stuck with me was, hey, the first time I was, not the first time, but one of these times he's away from home after a couple of years, someone says, hey, check out this pornographic image. And he was repulsed by it. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know too many men who aren't intrigued by it, right? Like, repulsion is not the usual response people get, right? It's like, whoa, show me more. I want some of that. Like, I'm interested, I'm intrigued. And our society's like, yeah, I'm a man. Let's go to, something society says is cool and manly and testosterone like, right? And he was like almost physically ill is what he said about it. And I thought, man, I would love, and I've never had, and of course, as a 51-year-old man, I have had images in front of me, of course. And so, I've never had that feeling. I've never, of a repulsion where I felt physically ill. Now, listen, I turn away. I'm not intrigued by that. But, I think at the same time, there's a time, right, that didn't feel so, hey, let me walk away. I'm walking away, but, how far do I get? I can still see it. Like, I don't know that I'm running away, right? No tools in my toolbox, right? And so I was like, so that's interesting that you talk about this. Like now, like I have a different level of like, ooh, that automatically is a negative for me. It just feels wrong.
Mhm.
It triggers something inside me that says that I've never had before.
Right.
So the tools are changing.
Yeah. And it's interesting you brought that up because like last night, coaching first base and we had a pretty nice crowd, dollar beers, like
Oh, dollar beer night. That's always
all right. So the rowdies are out and they're yelling at me at first base, left hand for a woman's rear end and a right hand for a woman's chest, right? Like I I just shook my head it's for me it's disappointing. Um,
yeah.
Especially in independent ball, like there's a lot of kids running around,
Yes.
things like that, and I get the fun of it. But they're only like I saw that same script from a major league game, right? Like so
Yeah.
they're not even original about it,
Right.
but that's where we're at today.
Yeah.
It's okay to do
Yeah. I
that.
mean,
It's okay to do that in front of kids. And I just wasn't going to participate in it as much as it wasn't a big deal, right?
yeah.
Like no, like yeah, like nobody probably would have thought about it a week from now if I
Yeah.
did, but I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny, having children. I'm one of those guys who says things, right? Like my kids are there. I'm like, hey, kids present. Like my dad did, right? Like my dad, like when kids were around and someone started saying something. Now, granted, it's just the 70s, right? Right. But man, my dad was like, hey, buddy, not okay. And like, you just got the tone. Like the guy was like, I never saw someone challenge my dad. My dad's like 5'6", 170 pounds, right? Like this is not like a large man, right?
Right.
But like the tone was authoritative, right?
Yep.
And I embarrassed the snot out of my kids. Like I got kids sitting in front of me in a movie theater dropping F bombs. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting with my kids, man. Like, hey, clean it up, boys.
Right.
Like I'm not having it. And
Right.
and they're like, sorry. I don't have people challenging me, but I know when I talk about that, like I think a lot of people in society won't say anything. They just like, oh, well, I don't, something could happen.
Right.
Well, something's already happening that's not okay.
Right.
And sometimes that tolerance is acceptance.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a tough deal, and I get it that you're not gonna maybe stand up in front of 4,000 people here at the stadium, right? But like I appreciate that hey, my role is I'm not gonna partake.
Right.
Not okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Um, all right, so before we come like post, right? I'm reminded quickly of some of the. I'd like you to share a story a little bit about your prison ministry because I recently read Chuck Colson's book, Born Again. Chuck Colson was, Nixon's right hand,
Mhm.
right, in the 70s. And of course, also the fall guy, like the guy who took it and started a prison ministry, right? I mean, that's what he did. And, it was amazing to hear the stories of his life there, which is a good portion of the book, talking about like people being there that didn't even know why they were there because the system had somewhat let them down. Like they didn't know how to read and write. They were just say, hey, you were charged for this. And they were like, I don't know. And lost their livelihoods, lost their ability to provide for their families. It was challenging, but definitely a guy who was willing to step out and be a light in a dark environment and does not describe it as easy as well. I think that was for sure. But why don't you speak to a little bit of your time in that prison ministry? I know you've had a chance to share with some people and life changed some things for you, how you could be positive for somebody else.
Yeah. So, I got sentenced. I did sentenced to 3.5 years. So I was like armored up, ready to go. And Bobby and Paul really set that foundation of what a Bible study looked like, and then I think, we were meeting with, Jason Walsh and those guys on Fridays, right? And then we were going to the men's group on Saturdays, right? Like 60 guys right there, like really authentic guys, like sharing their struggles and being in the support system, right? Like what the church is called to do. So I go in and I already had an idea of what it looked like, right? So I wouldn't say it was too difficult, but like you were saying, like the system really failed people. Like no matter how many programs you put in there, it's not going to change. Like evil's in there. Evil's not like the only way you're going to change that is through the heart. Like I saw 2 or 3 guys, like, again, I did 16, 18 months in there. I saw 2 or 3 guys like come back, and that's,
in that time they left and we're already back.
Yeah. Like breaking parole, stuff like that, and it's just, again, it's disappointing. But
you're in a state prison.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just one of those things. Like I made it known that I was a Christian. There's a lot of Christians on deck, and I'm not like, toot my own horn, but like, we would go to chapel on Sundays, and then guys would come back and watch Empire and talk about what they would do to so and so on the show.
Yeah. Right.
Again, it was disappointing. I knew God's standard. And I knew my need for Jesus Christ in my life. And I knew I was there for a purpose, and that was it. I wasn't there to make friends or anything, like just be the light. So we got started. I remember it came early. Like I got challenged, from different religious groups, I guess you can say. And I'm not a guy to talk about things. I'm like, don't give me a warning. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Just do it. And this is out in the hallway when we're cleaning our rooms and and stuff. And, I got challenged twice like that. I'm like, stop telling me what you're going to do to me and just do it already. Like if we're going to go, we're going to go. So that just bought a lot of respect, I guess, when I was on deck. So then I started a Bible study. It started with like me and 2 other guys. It grew to about 12 guys, up and down throughout, guys were leaving and stuff. But I remember one guy, like it's exhausting, right? Like you see these guys and you're trying to build them up and get them a solid foundation. And that's the thing, is like everybody's at different stages in their faith, right? Like,
yeah,
they're still young, so to speak, as compared to where I was at, or I just had better training or whatever it was. So it was exhausting just listening to these guys and try to be a support system for them, because they wanted it, it was real. And I just remember praying. There's a prayer in the Bible, prayer Jabez, that asked to increase territory. I remember praying that, and my territory did increase. But I also prayed for, I needed to see the fruit of my labor, right? Like all this work that I was doing with these guys, like I needed something. And like 2 weeks later, this guy will get shipped in. About a month into it, we're just kind of doing whatever. And he came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, I heard you're the Christian on deck. Like, do you mind if we talk?" And I was like, "No, man, like let's do it." And he told me like he lost his dad like 10 years prior, in an automobile accident, like not drug related or alcohol related or anything.
So pretty young guy when that happened. Pretty young.
Yeah, but he wrote God a letter talking about how much he hated him for taking his dad. And since then, Will had like 5 DUIs. He was getting blackout drunk. Like he didn't care if he killed somebody. He didn't care if he died. He was over it. So him and I met every week. He would come. We would do the Dex Bible study, like everybody. And then
does he have people outside waiting for him? Like, does he have people in his life that are there?
He didn't at the time. Like he had his sister and mom, but
okay, got it.
So him and I we did a special Bible study, just him and I, one-on-one, and we went through the book of James talking about trials. And I know we talked about that, like,
Yeah.
just do what it says, right? So
And well, the trials, just pure joy. It's pure joy right there. Consider it pure joy, these trials. Like,
right,
I can imagine that you and Will are sitting there going, this is so joyful. We're both in prison, and how joyful we are that we get to go through these trials, right?
right. Yeah. So Will, like, I was able to see like huge change in his heart, as with every week, and he started getting that tug on when he would swear and stuff, and it was just cool to see. So I got out like November 9th or 11th, and he got out the day before Thanksgiving of the same year. So he reached out to me on Facebook, and he was just like, "Hey man, I just want to let you know you saved another man's life in there. Like, I have a completely different outlook on life. I understand God works, and we don't have to know why. Sometimes he doesn't reveal it to us. But he's like, I'm ready to do this." So I would check in on him every now and then, and he was a supervisor. He was a foreman at his, doing carpentry work, framing, building houses. He was getting married. He got married, had a kid on the way. He was going to marriage retreats, like, just to build that foundation of, that marriage foundation. And it was awesome, man. And I get more joy from seeing that than, anything that this world has to offer. Watching a Big Ten championship game, my Buckeyes, rolling around and just tearing teams up. But it's like, yeah, that's fun. But I get so much joy. It's like a 2-week high for me, man. When guys are like, when you see that change in their heart and they're changing their life, it's just powerful.
It's good. Let me ask you a question. Like, looking back, what would you have done differently? Do you think you could have avoided it all? Do you think you needed this in your life? Like, would you have done something differently?
No. The life I'm living now is so peaceful. Like, there's wants, like I want more money. I want this, I want that, but it doesn't bring me that joy and that peace. Like, I'm not striving. Like, I've had the money, the house, the car to grow.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't want it anymore. Like, that'd be great. But touching guys' hearts, being here, like, on the field, like, I tell everybody, like, I get to go to work today. Right. Like, I think you met Alex, our mental skills coach at St. Xavier. Like, she just got hired on with the Brewers. And I was talking to her yesterday, and I was just like, hey, we both get to go to work now. Cause not that she wasn't happy, but
yeah,
she wasn't. And now she's at the Brewers complex out in Scottsdale. And I was like, yeah, we both get to go to work now, So to change anything, I wouldn't. I see so many like things that happened in my life where God was trying to get my attention, and I was just so hard-headed and in my own way.
Yeah.
I needed this in my life. I mean, I remember sharing my testimony at a church in Hammond, Indiana, with a guy that prayed for me in 2007, that I would come to Christ. And so I went there, and he's like, hey, do you want to share a little bit of your testimony? I'm like, nah, some other time, man. We're good. I was just here to see you. And he wasn't even preaching that day. And again, like, as soon as he got up there to talk and kind of see everybody out, like, the Holy Spirit's just like wrenching me. Right.
Yeah.
So I tell him, like, Hammer, I'll talk. So I get up there, like, a little 5-minute thing about what happened, talked about my suicide my thoughts and, depression and stuff. And there was a kid there that tried committing suicide that week. and his mom reached out to me, and just like, he was completely moved by my heart. And since then he's gotten baptized and completely changed his life and just a different outlook and stuff,
Got some
so
hope.
yeah, he had some hope. But yeah, like, to see how God's tried to get a hold of me, how he's got a hold of me, and then how he's used me. I'd still go through it all, and I told my buddies that too. I mean, society says drink, like, go ahead and drink, but don't drive. Right. Like, so, I mean, I think we've all been at that point where we on that line, like, I'm all right. And all my buddies have families and kids, and wives, and it was a big wake up for them.
Well,
They
I was going to say that I don't know if you get to our age in the 40s or 50s that you don't know friends that have had an alcohol related death. I mean, whether it's, a kid, a friend of the family who leaves a graduation party and jacks it up and loses a whole future, a whole life ahead of them, right?
Mhm.
Or friends I grew up with who, make an error with all a bunch of young families and one person who probably shouldn't have been where they should have been, and tragic, right? Like, because the impact is multiple people, wives, kids. I mean, it's just I just don't know if I know anyone that comes our age that doesn't have that impact in their life somehow.
Right. Yeah, and they were just like, it was a big wake up for us. I know two guys, two buddies of mine that are just like, I'm just done. I don't need it.
Yeah.
There's too much at risk now, because it was too close to home. And I've told them, like, I'm going through this for you, right? If this wakes up two or three guys, then it's all worth it.
Why don't you let's do a quick Q&A before we finish up here. What is describe being the leader you want to be?
That leader is just that. It's funny because, like, I look at, the players on the field, right? And you have the pitchers and the hitters, and then, there's the manager that manages all of it, right? And you got your pitching coach and you got your hitting coach. So for me, I think the leadership on my end, I think the manager has to be pretty even keel, not too high, not too low. Pitching coach, like, pitchers, especially lefties, are kind of quirky stuff, so I think a pitching coach kind of has to be that. And then we all know, like, the hitting side of it is just very negative. So, like, for me, I drive our skip pretty nuts about how positive I am. Like, guys are always like, hey, can you come in? Can you come in? Can you come in? And, like, I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you don't have to do this every single day. Like, you can organize it better. And I'm like, you're right, I can. But I want them to be who they are, and I will be there for them. Whatever.
Meet them where they're at.
Right. So, usually I'm at the yard like about a half hour ago. Like, I just get in. Guys will start coming in 1:30, 2 o'clock, and we do that, do some early work stuff. And I didn't have anything on the schedule today other than lunch at my favorite barbecue joint down the street at 2. And, one of the players hits me up last night, like, hey, Sonny, are you going to be at the field? I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to be there till late though. I'm like, what's up? He's like, I just want to see if we can get some early work in. Absolutely. I'll be there at 3 o'clock. Let's get it in before BP.
Yeah.
Things like that. So that servant, like we talked earlier, like that servant leadership, being positive, like smiling, like letting them know that everything's all right. I had a guy smoke 2 balls yesterday. We were really working on some things, and it kind of kind of finally saw it play out yesterday. They didn't result in anything other than on the data comes up as 106 off the bat.
Yeah.
You know, and he was kind of down, and he's like, you know, I got nothing to show for it. I'm like, you don't need anything to show for it. Like if you need raw data, like here it is, like the hardest ball you hit since the season started, right? But again, it's just pulling up next to them, meeting them where they're at, and like, hey, let's go. Like, we're in this together, right? Like, same thing with the championship team in 18. Like, those guys saw how much I worked, right? Like, just whatever they needed. Like, let's go. Well, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I didn't have a lot of knowledge at the time. The game had changed a little bit. I had kept up on some of it, and I explained that to them. Like, I don't have all the answers. I still tell the guys this, like, you have plenty of friends that are involved in baseball. I have plenty of friends that are involved in baseball, and we're going to figure this thing out. Like,
learning.
But I'm the first one to say, I have no idea. Right.
Yeah, I think that lifelong learning never stops, whatever career you're in. And for people who don't know baseball, the reason Kevin says hitting's negative is that hitting is 70% failure, and that means you're an all-star, right? So there's a lot of 80% failure, not uncommon, called the Mendoza line, which is kind of the break or make of any kind of organization. If you can't hit that line, then you probably shouldn't be where you're at, right? So it's a very fractional deal. I mean, you're talking about 2 hits to 3 hits is from not ever being able to go out and play again to $6 million a year. so that's a very fractional deal. So you can imagine what happens over 100 at bats. It's becomes very important.
Yep.
And there is, I think it's one of the reasons children are leaving Little League is that it's a lot of negative. It's not, you don't go out there and get success every time. You have to work at it, which is one of the reasons I love about the game. I love that it doesn't come so easy, that there's some stick-to-itiveness. There's some perseverance that's required to be successful. But I will tell you, the one thing that I always learn from, I mean, I can't imagine someone walking up at that top level, even at the high school level, right, who goes, well, that was too hard. I'll be taking myself out of the game after the first inning, and I won't be trying anymore, right? Yet in society, we do that all the time, right? Like, hey, listen, I picked up the guitar and I tried to strum it once. It didn't work out, so I'm not doing it again. Well, hold on. Wait, like, no. You're going to get to do it 4 more 5 more times. Let's see how it shakes out. Like, we got to get the reps. We got to practice. And that kind of goes to anything to get that success level. Right.
Yeah. So I've bought 2 acoustic guitars in my lifetime. Like, I said, I'm going to learn how to play this thing. And I never did. But I think, again, it goes back to having that support, having somebody there that can help you and, figure it out together. Right. Like,
well, someone's supporting you going, hey, man, that's your first chord. That sounded all right. Like, let's keep going. Right. Like, this is good. You what's the positive side of it? Yeah, I'm no Eddie Van Halen yet, but, I'm learning, I'm trying to get her right,
Right. Yeah. Having self-awareness is key when you're learning something new.
Well, and I think you learn that along your journey, right? Part of that self-awareness around your pride and arrogance and how that maybe didn't serve you as a young man like you'd hoped. And as athletes, by the way, some of that serves us, right? That confidence level. And then there's this really fine line of confidence to arrogance, and you cross it and it's like you can't go back, right? It's like, oh no, like I'm on the other side of the fence and no one will let me back in, right? And but people don't know it, right? They don't even know they crossed the line yet. And so that's, I think, a big part of that self-awareness, which part of your lesson. But let's before we finish here, I want you to, anything that we didn't cover, it's time for the best way to win. I mean, is there something you want to share with folks, that listeners, that we didn't touch on today? Like, hey, I'm always reminded of the McChesney and the from 4 Disciplines of Execution. Winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win. I mean, what do you think your best way is to overcome that when things aren't going the right direction? What's your kind of go-to, and what do you tell these young folks that you're working with?
Well, I think like my thing is just figure it out, right? Like how by any means necessary, right? Like you call your guys, I'll call my guys. Let's look at the data. Let's look at your swing. Let's look at video. Figure it out. Is it mental, right? Like where are we at? What are you doing when you get in the box? Are you resetting every pitch? What's your approach at? Like, right? Like, and sometimes it's nothing, right? Like sometimes they're just under the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they just swung through it. Sometimes bug got in their eye and they're just swinging because they couldn't see whatever. Like,
But when you say figure it out, I mean, it sounds like to me you're saying I take an inventory of the 8 things that's required of you to be successful in the box, let's say, okay, as a hitter. So you say, all right, inventory. Mentally, are you ready? Physically, are you prepared? Have you done the reps? Is your swing where you want it to be? Let's look at the video from where you were when you were going well to when you weren't going well. I mean, you have 8 or 10 triggers, video, all sorts of things that you look at data to figure out like, hey, here's one of the 8 that it's not there, right? Like and until we get, because we know in hitting, like all those 8 kind of got to align, right? We're back to heart and head, right? They got to kind of align to make it go forward.
right. Yeah. I got one guy that's a returner from our 19 season, and he had a pretty good season, and he's struggling right now, and he's not doing the same stuff that he did in 19. And I was like, well,
as far as preparedness,
yep, routine's different. And we talked about it. Skip had one of his younger kids from his travel org out here, and we sent him out to the infield with this player, and they were just talking, and the player comes in and he's like, Sonny, I haven't been sticking to my routine that I did for the last 2 off seasons. Like, I'm like, I knew it changed, but I just thought it was what you were doing. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that at all. Right. So like at that moment, he figured it out, hopefully. We're 2 games past that. And he's starting to hit the ball a little bit harder, but but there's definitely some checkpoints that we hit. And again, that's where self-awareness comes in. Like the player can say like, yeah, I'm locked in, or, I'm positive. I got that positive self-talk. But your body language is telling me something different, right?
Yeah.
Like you're lying to yourself, just things like that. Like you said, there's checkpoints that we touch on. And from that point on, we try to figure it out from there.
Well, I think it's a good example of, we don't go running away from what worked before. Like we don't go running away from good routines. We drift on it, right? Like all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, yeah, I haven't really been doing up. I wake up an hour later and I always feel like I'm behind, and, I didn't get my prep work in. So because I woke up, I don't eat as well in the morning. And, it's just downstroke of like, hey, what worked? And little changes, are big things, and when I talk about that drift, I'm often reminded of the flight to LA to New York. If you miss it by 1 click, right, on the dial of setting it, you land in DC, right? like it's like, it's just a little drift. Like, well, you land way off, bro. Like it's you are not getting to the destination that you want to go to. And that's just, 1 degree off in that mark, right? Because that's a length, right? And so, of course, you and I both know that we're probably 4 or 5 degrees off. So, hey, I was headed for Denver and landed in Austin. What the hell happened? Right? Not good. Like we're drifting faster in a shorter duration because we're a couple clicks off, right?
Right. But it goes the same way too, in a positive direction. Like, these guys are here because they lost who they are. Like, some guys didn't get drafted. Some guys got released from affiliated clubs, and they kind of lost who they were, so when they get here, it's like, hey, let's get back to who you were when you got drafted. But at the same time, like we have to make adjustments to get you back there. You know what I mean? So we have to drift off from who they were on a positive note.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Shore up those areas that take you outside of that pathway of where you want to go. Right.
right,
And yeah, sometimes we don't even know what those are.
right.
All right. Before we go, I'm going to give you I'd like to hear your favorite verse, quote, go to. What do you go to? What do you live by? What do you recommend when things are down? What kind of sets you back onto your foundation? For me, I want to thank Kevin Santiago before we go, and he tells me this for coming on. Like, Kevin, you're just a special guy to me. You inspire me every day, and I'm thrilled. For everyone else, please follow the YouTube live show, Leadershipity channel. Winners Find a Way. We are on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find us either at Leadershipity or at Trent M. Clark. Those are all my handles on social. Leadershipity.com is our website. Look for our upcoming ebook, The Pyramid of Leadershipity. Excited about that. If you want to talk with me about how we build and help teams win, if your organization is looking to get better and leaders, DM or email me, and we show how to win with great teams. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate us 5-star, subscribe to the channel, get on Winners Find a Way. We work hard to bring you 1% content, and like Kevin, of course, did not disappoint. Always so good, my man. So tell me your go-to. What's your thing, man?
Well, it's not my go. Well, I do, but my favorite quote is from you
Oh,
when it's I got a hard stop at 1 o'clock.
oh yeah.
And
Hard stop.
and you never hit it.
Never hit it. Not together.
Like
Not
way
together.
over.
Yeah.
No, but my quote for me to kind of get my bearings, my foundation is comes from James 1:12. Blessed is the man who perseveres through trials.
Nice.
It's everybody's going through something, and
Yes.
it doesn't have to be this huge accident that gets you 7 to 14 years, right? It can be, marriage stuff,
Yeah.
like struggling to find a gift, right? Like,
Yeah.
it can be, eating better, just little
Yep.
things throughout the day. Those are all trials. It's
Yeah.
something that everybody's dealing with.
Yeah.
But you're blessed when you persevere through that stuff, and I once asked my counselor, I said, and that was another thing too. Like I had her support from the get-go. I was meeting with her sometimes twice, 2-3 times a week. It felt like, but I said, how does one not persevere through this? Right? Like I just felt like it was, I didn't have a choice of getting through this.
Yeah.
She's like, you did. You chose not to pull the trigger that night. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
she's like,
Yeah. So half the decision, I think that's a really important one, right? Because when we talk about these decisions we make, it's not always the things we do. It's sometimes the things we don't do.
right.
That are making decisions. That is persevering. Like, for what we talked about earlier with pornography, not opening the computer is a big step, right? And I think for all of us to remember just that, Kevin, I think would be really valued. Everybody's going through something. Like I know, like when health started changing for my parents, and you're like, man, I remember my dad as my baseball coach and the guy throwing BP for me, and now I'm like, I gotta help him, do simple things. And it's like, man, this is like he doesn't even look like my dad anymore. Like, what you go and do with my dad?
Right.
And it's just like it weighs, right? It weighs on us. And all of a sudden, I find myself stressed and snapping at a cashier because I got to go back to the produce aisle to get something. Like, really, like, man, like she doesn't know like my dad's not well and I'm stressed about it, or there's financial issues, whatever it is, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Everyone's got something, some grace for that, I think, is a big deal in our culture. I think a grace that, hey, let's take a step back and be a little bit more sympathetic, a little bit more empathetic to that, because it's part of humanity, right? It's not easy. It's just not easy. My quote today, by the way, for you, I think about my quotes every week. It's really important. Like I really want to focus in on my guests for the week. And my quote for you, Kevin, was Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. And, as I think about that, like I know I'm one of these guys who's a planner. I got in my mind exactly how it's going to go. And then it never goes the way I think it's going to go. Right. And so, I realized like, hey, all good plans. Right.
That reminds me of when we were going to meet with Spezio.
Right.
And we're driving out there and you're like, so what are we going to talk about? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to tell him your story? I'm like, yeah. You're like, what happens if he asks us to leave? Like, then we leave. Like, I'm like, why are we trying to figure this out? Like, it's already handled, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's right. Right. The Lord's purpose. It's that prevails. Right. And so, and I think what you said important really early, like you don't have to understand it. I think that's okay. Right. I think it's okay that you don't understand it.
Yep.
So I'm always reminded of that because, as you've inspired me through this, that purpose has always prevailed for you. And I mean, I look at some things, I know we all got wants, man. I would love to have this kind of car. And man, like this is the neighborhood I'd probably rather be in and all that, the grass is always greener. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any more needs left. I just got a lot of wants like the rest of us Americans, right? We don't have a lot of needs because they're met,
Right.
And part of that is that we realize that there's a lot of great things. There's a lot of great things to be grateful for, and what success to one person. As much as you say, hey, what somebody's going through, and having empathy and sympathy for that, I think there's also hey, my idea of success is not Kevin's idea of success, is not my next door neighbor's success. I mean, is not someone coming out of university. We all got different identifiers of what we're going for, and I don't think any of them are necessarily wrong. Right. Like we're on a path to what we think is best for us. And I mean, having some respect and honor for that, I think is a big one. But in the end, it may not be our purpose. Right. And we have to yield.
Yeah. I remember someone reached out to me about starting like a development program. And, we just, our thoughts about where it should go and how it should get there just didn't line up. And he's like, this is a chance for you to be successful. And he knows my story, right? Like,
yeah.
And I'm like, but I already am.
Yeah.
Like I'm with 24 guys every single day for 5 months. Right. And I'm constantly walking the walk, showing the light. Like if I have an opportunity to I had a discussion with a player yesterday, just a little bit about my story and get into details about it. But like that for me, that's successful. Like wherever it's at, it doesn't have to be on the ball field. It doesn't have to be in major league ballparks, right? Like I'm in my major league season, right? Like this is it. If I go there, like, it doesn't matter where I'm at. I don't try. Like, would it be great? Like you said, like, yeah, it'd be awesome if I was a major league coach. Like if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm still successful every single place I'm at because it doesn't matter what level I'm at.
And would you change the way you go about your job if you were? That's just geography, right? Like whether you're working with these kids today in the Frontier League or you're working over in Anaheim with me and the Angels, like it's just geography, what we're doing and what our values are, what we're actually trying to accomplish, right? There may be a couple different strategies that may be different, but does that change who the person you are?
Nope.
I don't think so.
Nope.
I love it. Let's sign off on that, Kevin. I mean, I love it. Let's end there. I mean, I'm just so thankful you coming on board. For everyone else, thank you for joining us today. You will find us on our Leadershipity YouTube channel always, and you can see the recording there. It'll be broadcast on our podcast here in a number of weeks, which we'll lead up to. And thank you for joining us, Kevin. Thanks so much. For everybody else, see you next Friday, every Friday, 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, live on the Leadershipity YouTube channel. Winners find a way. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Trent.